Okay. Hail and welcome, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of Tales from the Mirror's Edge with everyone's favorite mirror ghost, Bloody Mary, here. Now, in honor of Halloween, and because I think this is about the creepiest story that I have in my collection of stuff, I'm going to tell you about how my grandmother's house got to be haunted. I did a video a while ago talking about how my grandmother's house was really, really haunted and the little shadow thing that haunts the ground. Well, today I'm going to tell you what I personally think brought it there and what I think our bloodline has a curse on it, and I'm pretty sure it stems from this event. So, back when they first bought the land that the house was on, it was maybe early 70s, somewhere along in there. My dad, I think, was still fairly young, maybe a teenager, I don't know. My grandma and grandpa bought the land, and it was a big plot of land, and it had an old abandoned house on it. It was a abandoned farmhouse. It from what I've been told, the house looked like it had sat abandoned for many, many, many years. It was falling down. It was in terrible shape. Just almost like you would have better luck just demolishing it and being done with it. But they bought the house and the land, and well, they decided they were gonna fix the house up. So my dad and my two uncles and my grandpa, they all knew about carpentry. So they started fixing the place up a little bit at a time till it was live-in ready. Why this house was abandoned in the first place, I have no idea. I've tried to look up more information on it and just hit dead ends. I can't find any info on it before my grandparents bought the house. I can't find any records of who it belonged to before that or anything. I've looked, I've tried. But since it was an old farm, it came with a fairly big plot of land on it. I don't know who discovered it or how they discovered it, but there was a patch of woods on their land, just a little patch of forest kind of thing going towards the edge of the property. Well, come to find out that in that patch of woods was an old family cemetery. It wasn't our family, but I assume, was the family of the people that owned the land before my grandparents bought it. I was never told the name that was on any of those stones. I don't know whose family it is. I've never seen the graves. I don't even know exactly where they're at anymore. And the land is no longer accessible to me to go out there and find these graves. A family member of mine has bought the house because my grandmother is dead, So she bought the house from the bank and she's going to fix it up, but that's a tale for a different time. Anyway, they discovered this small family cemetery on the edge of the land. There, from what I understand, was about 6 graves, I believe they said. And they were old. I mean, really old. From what I heard, the dates on these tombstones was like back in the 1800s, kind of old. Very, very old graves. Well, my grandpa was a very greedy man. And really, he was just evil. Just complete 100% evil. He got to thinking, well, if they are really that old, which the tombstone said they were, used to, back then, they would put coins on the eyes of the dead person and bury them. So that led to, well, they also might be wearing maybe some jewelry or something like that they were buried in, if they had anything like that. And antique stuff that way is worth a lot of money. So what was ultimately decided was he made my dad and my 2 uncles go out to the cemetery and dig the bodies up. He wanted to see if there was any coins on their eyes, any jewelry, any maybe handles on the caskets that was worth anything. Anything he thought that was worth money, he wanted. So he made the 3 boys dig the bodies up. Now, they claim that they were never superstitious or anything like that. They, I believe, were Pentecostal, and as far as I know, they never really believed in anything like ghosts or evil spirits or anything like that. So, but I say that to say this: my grandpa made the boys do all the work. He was evidently superstitious enough that he did not want to be near the graves. He never touched any of the dirt. He never touched any shovel. He never touched anything. He stood at the edge of the plot land under a tree and made them dig these people up. Now, the caskets were wood, from what I understand, wooden coffins. And once they dug down deep enough to uncover them, they took the shovels and busted into the caskets. And it was weird. Daddy talked about how the men that were in the caskets, the men's corpses, smelled like dirty, awful feet. And the women that were in the other caskets smelled like old flowers. That was something I remember hearing a lot, how the men smelled like feet and the women smelled like flowers, or like a stale, perfumey kind of thing. That was something that really stuck with him after they did this. They didn't find any coins, I don't think. The caskets were really rotten because they were just wood. And if there had been coins on their eyes, it probably had fallen into the back of their skull by the time they dug them up. They found some handles on the side of the caskets, they said, so they busted them off and got them out. I don't know if they found any jewelry on these bodies, but anything that Grandpa thought could be resold and worth any amount of money at all, he took and took it back to the house. To make matters worse, Grandpa didn't want the boys to cover the bodies back up. After they were done plundering what they could get out of the coffins, they left the graves standing wide open. They never recovered them. They were just left open to the elements. And Grandpa took what they got out of the coffins and sold them at an antique shop. This is what I believe has cursed our family and brought that shadow thing to the house. Because Daddy said that night they went to bed, everything was normal as it could be after something like that. And he said he woke up in the middle of the night and he couldn't see. It wasn't like sleep paralysis or anything. He said he woke up, opened his eyes, and he couldn't see anything. He said he sat up in bed and he couldn't see anything. It was like he had gone completely blind. It's not like, oh, they live out in the country, so of course it's going to be dark. I mean, he said it was like if he had lost his eyesight completely. He was completely blind, couldn't see anything. And that lasted for a few minutes. I forget how long he said exactly. But after the few minutes was up, his eyesight slowly returned, like almost like fading back in from the darkness. It faded back where he could see again. I think that was the first sign of they had pissed off something really negative and really evil. And I think that's what has haunted our family ever since. Because it's always seemed like there's been a dark cloud that hangs over our bloodline. Lots of us have met with unfortunate events in our lives. Lots of us have gotten cancer and died. Lots of us have, almost all of the people in my dad's side of the family has got mental issues. Depression runs heavy. Bipolar runs heavy. I suspect some schizophrenia as well. And from what other members have told me in the family, so far, every single person, starting from my dad and my uncles, they, as well as their kids, have all suffered a complete mental and emotional breakdown before their 30th birthday. And I mean a full breakdown, locked up in a mental asylum. I don't know what the term is now. I guess a hospital, I guess would be what you call it. A mental health treatment facility or whatever. All of them have been locked up in one of those places because they completely just snapped. Absolute, just off their rockers, crazy. It's happened to my dad. It happened to his brother. His other brother, I don't know if he suffered a mental breakdown as well. I never heard if he did. I have mental issues, nothing to that extent, and I hope it doesn't get to that extent. I have it. My brother has it. My cousin has already suffered her breakdown. And it's everything has seemed to go completely wrong ever since they desecrated those graves. My uncle, the one that I don't know if he suffered a mental thing or not, but that uncle, I fully believe, was murdered by his wife. They wrote it off as an aneurysm, a brain aneurysm, due to some heavy trauma to the head. He took trauma to several places, because when we went to the funeral, I remember they had the lights dimmed down where you couldn't see as well in the viewing area. And I was very young when this happened. I can still remember seeing the bruises on his face, on his neck, like big black and blue bruises through the mortuary makeup. And as far as that land out there, it's extremely, extremely haunted. And whatever is out there is very scary, and I believe very dangerous. That place, ever since I can remember, has always felt terrifying to be out there. 'Cause, like I said in my previous video, my mom had seen this little hooded shadow being full on. Like, you see me right now, it just stood there and looked at her. And I've caught a glimpse of it as well, going across the hallway, in the back hallway. When I turned to look at it, it vanished. Because I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, and when I turned to look, it was gone. But I seen it for a split second, I seen it. And my dad also saw it when he was alive. He caught it, I think, as it was fading out. He said it was kind of transparent, smoky, and kind of a brown color. But he saw it as well. I remember visiting out there. There would be times the phone would ring, and when they'd pick it up to answer it, like, you could hear from a distance, it was just white noise, and there was a few different voices trying to come through the noise. Nothing ever really came clear, but you could hear just muffled and garbled voices in the static. That happened out at that house. That happened at our house that I grew up in as a child. It happened out there. As I got older and when I got a cell phone, it happened to my personal phone, the garbled, I'd get voicemails and listen back to them, and it would be just the garbled white noise with voices in the background. My uncle, after my grandpa had died, my uncle moved back in with Granny because he was sick with cancer. So he moved in with her so they could kind of take care of each other, I guess. And he put up security cameras outside. Because, that house is pretty well in the middle of nowhere. And he was paranoid as it was. He was always paranoid that there was somebody outside or somebody trying to get in or whatever. So he put up security cameras. From the monitors that were in the living room beside his chair, I never saw it personally, but I remember hearing stories that my dad was telling, that he would see something move in the monitor, and when he would turn to look, there would be a dark shadow shaped like a man that would be outside showing up on the cameras. There'd be this figure, you'd see it at the back door, you would see it at the front door, you would see it walking around in the back porch area, like just walking around, just wandering around with no reason as to why it was there. And I remember several times where my uncle called Daddy at home, and this always happened at nighttime. Always happened at nighttime. It would be dark, like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and the phone would ring. Daddy'd answer it, and it'd be my uncle. And he'd be like, why were you outside walking around on the porch? Why didn't you just come in? Of course, Daddy's like, what do you mean? I wasn't on the porch. He's like, no, I saw you on the monitors. I saw you out back at the back door just wandering around on the porch. It's like, why didn't you just knock, or why didn't you just come in? Because they never locked the back door ever. As long as they lived there, they never locked it. So when we'd go to visit, we would just open the back door and come on in. And that happened several times, where my uncle's like, why didn't you just come in? What were you doing out there for so long, just standing on the back porch? Or why were you at the front door? Why were you just wandering around the house? What were you doing? And Daddy was like, I've been at home for hours now. I've been at home watching TV for the last couple, 2, 3, 4 hours. Like, I don't know what you mean. I was not out at y'all's house. I haven't even been out there today, period. But you would see it on the monitors. They would also see shadows inside the house. Apart from the hooded thing that lives out there, was also, I can remember going past doorways when we would go out there to visit, and it was always at nighttime. These people were complete night owls. They slept all day long and stayed up all night. So every time we'd go to visit, it was usually dark. And I remember you'd walk down the hallway, like past a doorway or something, and out of the corner of your eye, you could see the outline of someone standing in the dark room. It was always a man, and just out of the corner of your eye, you could always see it. You'd walk past the doorway, and it would look like something was just standing in the room, in the darkness, not moving, just standing there watching you. And if you turned to look, it would always disappear. It would never be there. But I remember seeing that a lot out there as well, and it scared me. I never turned to try to look at it until I got older. I always would just run back to the living room where everyone was and where there was light. I always felt safe in the light, because in the darkness, you would see things. You would have things happen. I don't know if I shared this story or not. If I did, I apologize. I'm going to tell it anyway. Me and my brother were out there visiting with Daddy. And it was nighttime, of course, as usual. And we were in the back hallway playing. And my grandma had a table beside her bed with a lamp on it. It was one of those old school lamps where you like tap the shade and it comes on, goes brighter, 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 and turns off. Well, the lamp was on. It was on probably about either the lowest or the medium setting, and no one was in there. The TV was on in her room, but she was in the living room with everyone else. We were standing there in her doorway. I don't know what we were arguing about, but we were fighting about something like we always did. And suddenly the lamp goes brighter. And it's enough that it catches both of our attention, and we turn to look at this thing. There's nothing there. There's nothing touching it. There's nobody in the room. And as we're looking at this lamp, it just goes out. It wasn't like a bulb had blown or anything like that. It was like somebody had touched it and just turned it off. And that scared the hell out of us. We ran back to the living room, scared to death. Of course, we never really talked about it to Daddy or to Grandma, because they all claimed that they didn't believe in stuff like that. But I know what I saw. And I think that their little grave robbing escapade is what has put a curse on our bloodline and on that land out there. And what makes it even worse is that house has seen at least 2 deaths inside the house itself. My grandpa died in there. My uncle also died in there. I'm not sure if Grandma died in the house or she died in the hospital. I'm not entirely sure. But there's been at least 2 deaths that I know of inside the house. And when a person dies that way, I feel like it makes a portal to the other side in our world. Because be it guardian angels, be it a family member, the angel of death, whatever, when that being comes to take your soul to the next side, it opens a doorway in this world. So it can come and get you and help you to cross over. That doorway, especially for places that are already haunted, doesn't close. It's almost like a permanent tear into this world. And other beings that are kind of drifting in the borderlands between life and death, call it purgatory or, whatever. The things that are in the in-between can find those doors and come in. And not everything that comes in is friendly. Because my grandpa died when I was very, very young. I think I was maybe 5 or 6, if that. And after he died, the house was creepy to begin with, but after he died, it felt even worse. I don't know if his soul ever actually crossed over. I don't know, because that would explain, at least to me, it would kind of explain the male figure you'd always see standing outside in the shadows, whatever, wandering around the property, wandering inside the house. It could be the little shadow thing shape-shifting, because they can do that as well. Or it might be his soul is still out there. Because whatever this dark shadow thing is, I feel like it uses the doorways that were punched in this world when the deaths happened in the house. It pulls other spirits, other beings, other things in through it and kind of dominates them. I feel like the souls of both my grandparents and my uncle are probably still out there. I don't think they ever crossed over, because that house was always full of so much greed and so much hatred and so many negative emotions and actions. It kept this thing fed pretty good when they were alive, and I don't think it let them cross over after they died. Because I remember my baby cousins, of course they're not babies anymore. At the time they were babies, they didn't live around here. My uncle and their mom split up after her second child by him was born, and they moved off from here, which, okay. His 2 kids would come down and visit from time to time, and they would stay out there with him in Granny's house. And I remember they were always afraid as well. I remember hearing about how my male cousin, my youngest cousin, was scared to be by himself. He talked about the boogeyman in the closet, how it was going to get him, how it was going to eat him. I asked him what he meant by that, and he said, it's the boogeyman. He's got really big teeth. He's got big, big teeth, and he's going to eat me. I remember the older of the 2 cousins, she was found, well, when she stayed with them, they found out after she had woken up the next day and whatever, and it was more times than once, they would go in there and they would find kitchen knives under her pillow. I mean, like, you know, the big kitchen knives, the sharp knives you cut meat and stuff with. They would always find a knife underneath her pillow when she stayed over there. And finally, they asked her, like, why do you keep taking knives out of the kitchen. You know you're not supposed to have these. They're dangerous. Why do you keep taking them and putting them under your pillow? And she responded with, it makes me feel safe. She was so scared to sleep out there. She armed herself. And keep in mind, at the time she was maybe 6 years old. And she was so scared as a 6-year-old, she was hiding knives under her pillow so she could protect herself from the boogeyman. And like I said, the other of my cousins, the youngest one, he would always talk about the boogeyman and his big teeth. How he's got big, big teeth and it was going to eat him. I believe fully 100% that that was the little hooded shadow thing that was out there. These little fuckers love to feed on negativity, anger, greed, fear, anything negative that way. They feed on that energy. And kids are a lot more open to seeing this kind of stuff. Their third eye is a lot more open than adults. Their imagination is working in overdrive nonstop. They're very creative. They've got a lot of energy. They also don't have the weight on their shoulders that adults do. Like, they're not worried about how are we going to afford to eat? How are we going to afford to pay the bills? You know, how are we going to afford X, Y, and Z, whatever. They don't have all of the worries on them that we do. And since they are more carefree, they're more innocent, their third eye is a lot more open to seeing things, to hearing things, to experiencing these things. Because we're all born with that ability to connect to the other side. But as we grow up, a lot of us repress it. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. It just kind of gets pushed into the background with everything else we have to worry about as we get older. Kind of keeps our attention focused on that, and we're not as open to the subtleties that the next world is presenting to us. But kids are. And it's, you know, a lot of times kids will have imaginary friends. They'll be afraid of something under their bed, whatever. I believe that they're not lying. They're not making it up. They are really, truly seeing something and hearing something and feeling something is there. And we can't because we are more closed off to it. But they were scared. And I know me and my brother were also scared. Every time we'd go out there, we were scared. This thing stayed in the back of the house mostly because the back of the house was, one, the older part of the house, and two, the darker part of the house. It never really came into the living room. It never came into the living room. The living room was a lot brighter, and the living room was also the new addition to the house they had built on after they had fixed it up and moved in. So it never came in there. But that's what I believe this thing, that's why it's there. When they opened those graves and they desecrated those graves and they robbed those graves, it angered their spirits. I don't know, they're doing construction outside somewhere on another street. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but that's what that is. But it angered their spirits. And that kind of greed and desecration that way brought something into this world. It brought down the wrath of something. And that's why I think this thing, that's where I think it came from. Because that is horrible disrespect for the dead. And just such an act of pure evil and pure greed. It attracted something into this world. And I believe it has cursed our family and cursed that land out there. Now, my cousin, the one that used to sleep with knives under her pillow, is an adult now. She has just recently had a child with her husband, and since Grandma has been dead all these years and the estate had so much money and things borrowed against it, the bank has just kind of had this house and the land in limbo for all these years, trying to reach a settlement. I have gone back several times to the house. It has sat abandoned now for many years. And the thing that drove me back the last couple times was that my cousin has purchased the house from the bank. And she's planning to move into it with her husband and her newborn child. I don't know if she remembers all the things that happened to us kids all those years ago. I don't know if she even believes that any of it was real. But what had me concerned is she's got a newborn child. That child has our family's blood. If she moves in out there, which she's planning to, I'm afraid this thing is gonna go after that child hard. So, back in the summer, I went out there and performed an exorcism on the house. We were out there for a good while doing the exorcism. And I saged the entire house. I burned incense. I sprayed holy water. I had a recipe that I use. I call it liquid smudge stick that I sprayed. I brought blessed oils and I sealed every window, every doorway, and all the mirrors in the house with that holy oil in the shape of a cross. And we performed the Catholic Roman rites of exorcism. I looked up the ritual and I performed it on the house. And by the time we got ready to leave, there was a very palpable feeling of tension in the air out there. I knew I had made this thing mad by trying to get rid of it. and you could feel eyes on you. You could feel this thing watching you. And what it felt like and how I had it described to me, it was me and my mom went out there to do this exorcism. How she described it, because I asked her about it and she felt it too, was it felt almost like we were being hunted. It felt like this thing was standing back in the shadows watching us, almost like a cat would stalk a mouse before it pounces. That's what it felt like. And I didn't feel that the exorcism was successful. I felt like whatever it was going to take a lot more to get rid of. So what I ended up doing was, a couple months later, we went back. And this has been within the last couple months, we went back out there just to see what, if anything, else we could do. And when we walked in, for the first time in my entire life going into this house, I didn't feel anything. It felt like just a normal, empty house. Because the day we went out there to perform the exorcism, when we walked in, now I told you, and I'll say again, this house had been abandoned for years by the time I did the exorcism. So there's no electricity, there's no running water, there's no air conditioning out there. When we went in on the day I did the exorcism, as soon as we walked in, this was in the summer, keep in mind. Like, it was warm weather, it was, not summer, it was spring. It was warm outside, like 80 something degrees. It was warm and sunny. When we went in, the house was cold. And I mean cold like they always kept it. That house was always cold when we would go over there to visit. It was always at about 68 degrees inside. And when we went in on that day, it was cold. It felt like the air conditioner was running, even though we know that's impossible because there's no electricity. You didn't hear the unit running. There's no reason for this house to be this cold. It was really cold. And something else, you could smell the whole house smelled like Grandma's perfume. Grandma always wore a very strong perfume. And I don't know what kind it was, but it's a smell I will never forget. And the whole house smelled like her. She had been dead for years when we went over there. There was no perfume in that house. There's no reason it should smell like perfume in that house, but it did. It smelled like her. And when we went back just a couple months ago to check things out, the house was not cold. The house was warm like it was outside. The scent of perfume in the air was gone. It smelled musty, like an abandoned house, like you would expect it to smell. Because there is mold in there. There is water damage. The house is kind of falling down just because it's been abandoned for so long. But it really threw me for a loop, because this is the first time I can ever remember going into this place and it feeling like a house. Just a regular house. I didn't feel anything watching us. I didn't feel anything hiding in the shadows. I didn't feel anything at all. It felt just like a normal, empty house. And that has got me more concerned than going in there and smelling her perfume did. This thing, when we left, was very angry because I was trying to get rid of it. I don't feel like after that many years of haunting that house, I mean like 30 plus years of haunting that house, I don't feel like one exorcism got rid of it fully. This thing is weak. It's been starved from any kind of human energy to draw on for years now, but it's got me very concerned. Because when we left out there after the exorcism, I did not feel like I got rid of it. I felt like I had pissed it off. And I felt, clearly felt, this thing's gonna come after us because of what I did. And then when we went back out there, I didn't feel it. I don't know where it went. I don't know if I unleashed it onto the world to go other places. I don't think it's gone. I don't know where it is, but I don't feel like it would give up that land that easily, especially not after how many years it's been haunted. And it's got me concerned. I don't know where it is. I don't know where it has gone to or what it's planning, but I don't feel like it's gone, and I don't feel like it's done with our family. Because when I was out there last, a relative of mine was out. It's him and a buddy of his is, we found out later, fixing up the house so they can get ready to move in, my cousin and her husband. They're out there fixing it up. And that day we happened to cross paths because we were out there. I was trying to do some recording to see if I could catch any EVPs or anything. And during the middle of my investigation, we heard something at the door. So we go and see, and sure enough, it's my relative and his friend. We scared each other because, they weren't expecting anyone to be in the house. We weren't expecting anyone to show up, but we crossed paths. And they started talking about the house and memories and things out there. And we were talking about how, awful shape it's in. And they said, yeah, we think there might be like a squatter or something staying here from time to time. We've found evidence of people being in the house, which they probably found the evidence of where we were in the house, to be honest with you. But what really caught my attention was, this was our most recent trip back. This was after the exorcism had taken place. And I don't remember how it came up in conversation, but I remember him saying, we've been out here before. We've heard the back door open. We've heard cars pull up in the driveway and there's no one there. We've heard something beating on the outside of the house. We've heard something beating on the walls inside the house. And they described it as, it doesn't sound like if an animal had gotten in the walls, or it didn't sound like that. He said it sounded like something, like somebody took their fist and just banged on the wall about 3 times. Just bang, bang, bang. And then it would stop, and then bang, bang, bang. The banging on the walls is something that also happened in my childhood home. And I will tell that story later if I haven't already. I don't think I've told that story yet, but I shall. But that's something that happened in my childhood home as well. Something would bang on the outside of the house. And it always came in 3s. Now, when it comes to dealing with negative entities like this, 3 is a very important number. Evil spirits and demons and things will do things in sets of 3 to mock the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. 3 is a holy number. 3 p.m. is also when it's believed that Christ died on the cross. 3 significance again. So demons and evil spirits will do things in sets of 3 as a mockery to God. And the fact that they told us that, something was beating on the walls in sets of 3 is very significant to us. Because we have not shared any of the ghost stories or anything paranormal that has happened to us in the house I grew up in. We never told those stories of what happened to anybody. Our family members don't know, friends don't know, nobody knows these stories that I'm sharing with you guys. Nobody knows them except us that were in the house that lived through it. Nobody else knows these stories. But I feel like bringing awareness to the situation and bringing awareness to the dark thing that seems to hang over our bloodline, I feel like bringing light onto the situation helps to weaken it, because isolation is another negative thing that these things feed off of. And the more I feel the story gets shared around, the more we're severing that tie that it has over us, the isolation, the feeling alone, the feeling like no one's going to believe you because you're crazy. I know there's always going to be people out there that don't believe a word I say, and that's fine. I don't care. Hopefully, if nothing else, you enjoy listening to the stories. But everything I'm sharing with you guys is real. It happened, and I want to bring all of the dark secrets, the dark memories, and all the fear that we felt all these years. I want to finally bring it to the surface and get the word out there of what these things can do to sever the ties it has over us. Also to encourage others that this stuff is real. You are not alone. These things do happen. And if nothing else, I believe you because I've lived through it. I know what these things can do. I've seen it firsthand. And I want to help. So I will link my email address in the description in this video. I also will have links to my social media. If you guys have problems with anything like this and you feel like you don't have anywhere to turn, please contact me, okay? I know this stuff is real because I have lived through it. I will believe you. And if I can, I will try to help you. So please get in touch with me for anything like this. You know, if you've got any kind of ghost or anything, demon, whatever, anything that is scaring you, scaring your family, your pets, your kids, whatever, get a hold of me. We will sit and talk about it. I want to hear your stories and come up with a game plan to get this to stop. Because I have been fighting this shit my entire life, running from it, scared to death. And as I get older and older and older, I'm finding the fear is going away, the courage is building up, and I am ready to take these things head on and get this shit to stop. I'm not going to be afraid of it anymore. There's always been a darkness that hangs over our family, and it stops here. I want to try to help any way I can, because I know this shit is real and it is very scary. So I'm not sure exactly how to break this curse that is on my family. I don't believe that it has been broken on the land out there. I don't think this thing is gone. I think this thing is in hiding somewhere. Because it's almost like this thing it didn't put up much of a fight, and it just kind of left a little too easy. And I know full well, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So I don't know what this thing has in store for us. If any of you guys have any spells or any suggestions on how to sever this thing's tie to our family, to break the curse, to get rid of this thing off the land, please also feel free to contact me. I would like to know any suggestions you guys have. But that is how I believe that house has been haunted, and the thing that hangs over our family ever since. It's an absolute nightmare story, but it's 100% true. I don't care if you believe me or you don't, but it's true, and it happened, and this has been my life. So on that note, I hope you guys have a happy and safe Halloween. I will leave links to contact me down in the description below. So we've come to the thinnest part of the veil. You guys be safe out there. Please don't desecrate graves. And avoid looking into the mirrors in the darkness, because you don't ever know what could be looking back at you. Happy Halloween, guys. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye.